Championship coming at you, Arizona State versus Iowa State, a game that I think is flying under the radar for a couple of reasons. I would say first and foremost, nobody was anticipating Arizona State and Iowa State to be in the championship game, at least in terms of Arizona State. In many ways, this is kind of looking to be a rebuild for him. At least on paper, there wasn't too much talent there. Kenny Dillingham is still kind of was at the time still finding his rhythm in terms of this program. A number of different sanctions and probation and whatnot too. So it's a testament to what Kenny Dillingham has done thus far, especially the shit show that Herm Edwards, Antonio Pierce left the Sun Devil program in. So for him to be able to turn this around in 2 seasons and also be able to maximize the talents of Sam Levitt and Jordan Tyson and Cam Scadaboo, it's definitely a testament to what Kenny Dillingham has done and also just the future, the trajectory of this program as well. And then when you look at Matt Campbell, very experienced head coach, his eighth season at Iowa State, 90 plus wins, and it's gonna be, and they're looking for their first ever season with 10 plus wins in their 133-year history. And Matt Campbell is a phenomenal coach, and he's definitely going to get some looks in terms of some of the bigger jobs that are going to be coming up in this cycle. But when you look at this game on paper, obviously it's a surprise that these teams are even here, but it's a testament to the coaching that they have, and also just how important it is, especially in college football, to be developing players and to be maximizing what you have too. Because as much as you hear about NIL and transfer portal and all those different things, when it comes down to it, if you can get the homegrown talent in there, you maximize what you have and you make changes little by little. It's these type of programs that you end up talking about for the conference championship. So big shout out to them in terms of them putting all of this together too, because I've covered Big 12 on this program a number of times between Colorado, Utah, Oklahoma State, Baylor, West Virginia, but I never really talked about these programs, and I'm really excited to dive into this too. But when you look at this on paper, Arizona State and Iowa State, at least statistically speaking, are similar in a number of different ways. They are the top two in time of possession, with 32 minutes and 32 seconds for Arizona State and 32 minutes and 22 seconds for Iowa State. So in some ways, they tried to win the game in a very similar fashion. In terms of Sam Levin and Rocco Beck, both quarterbacks are extremely fun to watch. Both are a lot more athletic than I think they get credit for, and they can sling the ball here and there when they have to. Obviously, Sam Levitt had some injury issues and whatnot too, but he's able to turn it around. And when you have some key weapons like Jordan Tyson and Cam Scadaboo surrounding you, it definitely makes it a lot easier. And it's also a big testament to the leadership capabilities of him as well. When it was just announced a few hours ago that he would donate his merchandise sales to the Sun Devil Collective, which is a testament to his leadership and also just the type of culture that they're building in Arizona State. And then when it comes to Iowa State too, Matt Campbell is the pillar of what exactly you would want in terms of a head coach. He is an excellent leader. He knows how to develop. He knows how to maximize the players that he has. And for the most part, Iowa State is one of those programs, or for the most part, always going to kind of fly under the radar just because they're in the Big 12 conference. They're going to get overshadowed by the Hawkeyes a lot. But it says a lot about what the Cyclones have done this year, especially when they've flirted with the top 10 throughout this season too, and even mainstream media too as well has not really covered Iowa State too much, because at least at the beginning of the season, the big storyline was the Colorado Buffaloes or the Utah Utes, or just the kind of the typical teams that people cover. But it's definitely at least an intriguing matchup. I mean, it's the first time that these two programs have ever played each other. Arizona State is looking for their first 10-win season since 2014. And when you look at the story kind of all together, even though statistically speaking they're similar in a couple different ways, you can't help yourself but think to yourself that, to me, this is Arizona State's game to win. And when you look at this full picture, the way Arizona State wins football games is very favorable comparable to what Iowa State has. And what I mean by that is Iowa State, one of the big things that they've struggled with this year is being able to stop the run not getting home in terms of their defensive line. They're one of the worst teams in college football in terms of getting sacks. They rank 96th in terms of rush defense, which, especially when you know that Jordan Tyson's going to be out for this game, and you know Cam Scadaboo went off versus Arizona and BYU these last couple weeks, as well as even when you go back and, for example, and watch the Utah game or some of their other games that they've had this year. That's been the one common denominator between Arizona State being dominant and where they're at right now being 10-2. So if you're an Arizona State Sun Devil fan, you have to say to yourself, what's stopping Arizona State from doing exactly what they've been doing throughout the season? And quite frankly, when you look at this matchup, it gives you any sort of pause to think to yourself that the Sun Devils can't win this game. If they run the ball as effectively as they're going to, which should be anticipated, as both these teams average well over 400 yards a game in terms of collective offense. You know Cam Scadaboo's gonna get fed. I'd say at least 25, 30 carries minimum. He can be a little bit of a threat in terms of the receiving game, but obviously his bread and butter is more of just running the ball. Reminds me a lot of Peyton Hillis. I think would be a really good comparison for you NFL fans out there, in terms of he's kind of stocky, he's bulky, he can break tackles, he had some great takeaway speed too, and he's just kind of a wrecking ball in that way too. So he's a lot of fun to watch, and I'm really intrigued to kind of see what Iowa State kind of plans to do in terms of stopping them too, because you got to imagine that Iowa State, since they've struggled particularly with their run defense, you have to say to yourself, okay, well, the first thing you're going to do is stack the box and add some more people in there. But at the same time, if you're Arizona State, I would not be surprised if they utilize some tight end packages a little bit more, maybe getting the play action going to see if you can make this Iowa State defense bite, which leads me to my other point. I think this game's going to be really big in terms of the Iowa State, particularly the linebacking core, because I think they're going to have a lot of different assignments, whether it's Arizona State working on that zone option where you can get Scadaboo going out wide, but also Sam Levitt is really gritty and he can bounce off tackles, and he's athletic enough to the point where if you lead him unaccounted for, he can definitely make you pay in terms of that aspect of it too. So if you're Arizona State, look for them to be able to attack you in a number of different ways, much like you saw in the BYU game, because if you're watching the BYU game, they had absolutely zero answers for him whatsoever. And this was supposed to be a BYU team that, if they controlled their own destiny and won the games that they were supposed to win, quite frankly, that's the team that we should be talking about right now. Even though I do think, I talked about them about a month ago, BYU is a legit program and they are leading in the right direction, especially with Sataki kind of being on the hot seat going into the season. But when you look at this full picture, it isn't that surprising that Arizona State ultimately winning this game. I think what's probably a bigger surprise, just how much media attention that they're getting at this point in time, given the overall status of the Big 12 in general. And then, turning this over to Iowa State, if I were Iowa State and Matt Campbell, I kind of ask yourself, well, how do you think you're going to win this game? Well, for both teams, but especially for Iowa State, one of the first things I'm going to have to ask myself is, you're going to have to be the one to control the tempo of this game, because the game's going to be played in Arlington, Texas. So probably I guess you can call it a neutral site game, but it's going to be a little bit more skewed to the Arizona State fans, you have to imagine too. And if you're Matt Campbell, you're going to have to use all your experience to really put this together too. And, considering just the ineptitude that the program was at the beginning of Matt Campbell's tenure to where they are right now, it's definitely pretty exciting for them to be there too. It's their, out of 9 seasons that Campbell's been here, they're bowl eligible for the 7th time. So it's that pillar of consistency that really is the difference between teams that we're talking about versus right now versus teams that, go 6-6 and we don't talk about them ever again, a la West Virginia, for example. But putting this all together, statistically speaking, you're going to have to ask more out of your defensive line. If they're not getting home versus Levitt, and they're allowing Cam Scadaboo to get those extra yards on some of these runs, I think it could be a long day for Iowa State. Now, granted, you do have Jordan Tyson out, and outside of him, the wide receiving core is not one of the best in the country, but at the same time, it does give you a little bit less pressure off that Iowa State secondary, because Iowa State, for the most part, has been pretty solid at stopping the passing game this year. It's the running game that's going to be a major concern. And when you ask yourself, can Iowa State do enough to stop them, it definitely gives you pause too, because when you say to yourself too, you know, the Cyclones for the most part this year have been solid all around too. And when you think about them, at least offensively, Rocco Beck has been a solid quarterback this year for him. He has about 20 touchdown passes, 7 on the run, 300 something yards rushing. So he does have enough of that athletic ability to make you pay a little bit, but it's not supreme athleticism to the point where he's a Lenore Sellers or something like that too. However, what concerns me about Rocco Beck is, for the most part, they've had a number of interceptions and costly turnovers that have cost them the game. And especially you saw Jake Razliff in that BYU game getting pressured all game long. And if Iowa State can't get that protection held together, and Rocco Beck gets nervous and can't handle the pressure, this really could spell a long day for Iowa State. And regardless of who wins this game, I think both head coaches should be proud of what they've done, because for them to even be in this situation, it's a testament to the coaching that they've had. And also, it's just fascinating too, that given that this is their first ever matchup, and just how much on paper and similar that they are, given that they both average 30 plus yards and 30 plus points in terms of offense, 400 plus yards in terms of offense. But to me, it's good. The real key difference to me is going to be the Sun Devils can be able to do just enough to the point where they're going to cause Rocco Beck some pressure and be able to turn the ball over. And then most importantly, it's going to be really difficult for Iowa State to stop them on the run, even though Jordan Tyson's out. So right now, give me Arizona State to be winning the Big 12 and moving on to the college football playoff.